On Mother's Day, while the world was posting flowers and smiling family photos online, 3 children were secretly planning to throw their own mother out of her house. But what happened next destroyed their lives forever. Shanta woke up every morning before sunrise, long before the streets outside became noisy and long before her children opened their eyes. The small kitchen light was always the first light inside the house. Even in winter, when cold air slipped through the broken window near the sink, she quietly wrapped a shawl around herself and began preparing breakfast. She never complained about the cold. She never complained about the pain in her knees. Her only concern was whether her children would wake up on time for school and whether their lunch boxes would be full. While other people slept peacefully, mothers like Shanta were already fighting small, invisible battles nobody noticed. She carefully ironed school uniforms late at night after everyone had gone to sleep. Sometimes electricity disappeared for hours, but she still sat beside a candle fixing torn buttons or stitching socks so her children would never feel embarrassed in front of others. She often pricked her fingers with the needle, but she quietly wiped the blood away before anyone saw it. Her children never knew that many nights she slept hungry. When food in the kitchen was not enough, Shanta always smiled and said, "I already ate earlier." But that was never true. She simply watched her children eat until their stomachs were full. That alone made her feel satisfied. After her husband passed away unexpectedly, the entire responsibility of the family fell onto her shoulders overnight. The house became quieter after his death, but the burden became heavier. Relatives visited during the funeral, spoke kind words, cried for a few days, and then slowly disappeared back into their own lives. But Shanta could not disappear from her responsibilities. She had 3 children looking at her with fear and uncertainty in their eyes. That night, after everyone slept, she sat alone near her husband's photograph and silently cried. Not because she was weak, but because she knew she no longer had the luxury of breaking down. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise again. Life did not stop giving responsibilities simply because her heart was shattered. She started working at a small tailoring shop during the day. The owner paid very little, but she accepted every extra piece of work available. At night, she cleaned offices in another part of town just to earn enough money for rent, school fees, and food. Many nights she returned home so exhausted that her feet trembled while walking. Still, before sleeping, she checked whether her children had blankets covering them properly. That was motherhood. Even pain had to wait. One evening, her eldest son Raj came home excited about a school trip. All his classmates were going, and he desperately wanted to join them. The fee was expensive, far beyond what Shanta could afford at that moment. She smiled and said softly, "Don't worry, you'll go too." Raj happily hugged her and ran outside to play, never realizing that his mother spent the entire night staring at her small jewelry box. Inside it was the last gold bracelet her husband had given her years ago. It carried memories, emotions, and love. But the next morning, the bracelet was gone. And Raj went on his school trip with a big smile on his face. He never knew the price his mother had paid for that smile. Years passed like this. Small sacrifices every day. Invisible sacrifices. The kind nobody applauds. The kind society rarely notices. When her daughter Neha fell sick during winter, Shanta stayed awake for 3 nights beside her bed. She placed wet cloth on her forehead again and again while praying silently that the fever would go away. Her own body burned with exhaustion, but she ignored it completely. Mothers become doctors when children are sick. They become guards when children are afraid. They become warriors when life becomes difficult. And somehow they continue smiling through all of it. One rainy evening, Amit came home crying because other children mocked his old shoes. He tried hiding his tears, but Shanta immediately understood. The next morning, she gave him a brand new pair. Amit's face lit up with happiness. "Where did you get the money?" he asked innocently. Shanta smiled. "I saved a little." But once again it was not true. She had skipped buying her own medicine that month. Her headaches became worse afterward, but she never mentioned them. Children often remember the things they received. Mothers remember the things they gave up. As the years passed, her children slowly grew older and more independent. Their voices changed. Their dreams became bigger. They started building lives outside the small house that once held their entire world. And slowly, like many parents, Shanta became invisible inside her own home. Her children no longer noticed the tiredness in her eyes. No longer noticed how slowly she walked. No longer noticed how her hands shook while serving food. Because people often become too busy chasing the future to appreciate the person who protected their past. Still, Shanta never stopped loving them. Even when Raj became impatient and rude after stressful days at work, she defended him. "He's just tired," she told herself. Even when Neha forgot to call for weeks, Shanta waited beside the phone every evening with hope in her eyes. Even when Amit became distant and distracted, she still prepared his favorite meals whenever he visited. A mother's heart continues giving love even when it receives very little in return. That is what makes mothers extraordinary. Not perfection, not strength, but endless patience. One afternoon, a neighbor asked Shanta an honest question. "After everything you sacrificed, do you ever feel disappointed?" Shanta became quiet for a moment. Then she smiled softly. "When children are small," she said, "parents hold their hands while teaching them how to walk. But when parents grow old, they silently pray their children will not let go of theirs." There was no anger in her voice, only truth. Because deep inside, every aging parent carries the same fear. The fear of becoming unwanted. The fear of becoming a burden. The fear that one day the children they raised with unconditional love may no longer have time, patience, or space for them. And perhaps the saddest part is this. Parents rarely expect luxury from their children. They do not ask for expensive gifts. They do not demand grand celebrations. Most parents only want small things. Respect, time, care, a little kindness, a simple phone call, a warm conversation, a feeling that they still matter. But in today's fast-moving world, many elderly parents sit quietly in empty rooms while their children remain busy chasing careers, money, and social status. The same parents who once sacrificed sleep, comfort, and happiness now hesitate even to ask for attention because they fear disturbing their own children. And still, even after being ignored, mothers continue waiting near doors. Continue saving favorite foods. Continue praying for their children every single night. Because motherhood does not retire with age. It survives heartbreak. It survives loneliness. It survives silence. A mother may grow physically weak over time, but emotionally she continues carrying her children inside her heart until her very last breath. That is why betrayal from one's own children hurts differently. Not because mothers expect repayment for their sacrifices, but because they never imagined the same children they protected from the world would one day become the reason for their tears. When Raj received his first big promotion, the entire family celebrated proudly. Shanta cooked all his favorite dishes, invited close relatives, and spent the evening smiling as she watched her son speak confidently about his new office, higher salary, and future plans. She felt proud seeing him successful because every sacrifice she had made suddenly felt worth it. But success changed Raj slowly. At first, the changes were small and almost invisible. He stopped sitting with his mother during dinner because he was busy. Then he started speaking more impatiently whenever she asked simple questions. Sometimes he returned home late at night without even informing her. When Shanta waited worried near the door, he would simply say, "Mom, stop acting like I'm still a child." The warmth in his voice slowly disappeared. Money had entered his life, and with it came a dangerous feeling, superiority. Soon Raj became obsessed with appearances. Expensive clothes replaced simple ones. He changed his old friends, bought a luxury car, and constantly compared himself with richer people. Every conversation became about status, profit, investments, or property. Without realizing it, he stopped seeing people emotionally and started measuring everything by value. Even relationships. Neha changed too after her marriage into a wealthy family. In the beginning, she visited often and spent hours talking to her mother in the kitchen. But over time, her priorities shifted. She became more focused on social image, parties, branded items, and maintaining a perfect lifestyle online. Whenever she visited the old family house, she looked uncomfortable. "This place feels so outdated," she once said while looking around with embarrassment. Shanta quietly smiled, pretending not to feel hurt. That same house had once protected Neha from storms, sickness, and fear. Those same old walls had heard her childhood laughter every single day. But greed has a strange effect on people. It slowly erases emotional memory. Amit was different from his siblings. He was softer and less materialistic, but even he became influenced by them over time. He worked in a private company where everyone constantly talked about money and success. Little by little, he also started believing that financial growth mattered more than emotional connection. The siblings began meeting privately more often. And during those conversations, one topic repeatedly appeared: the house. At first, they discussed it casually. "This property must be worth a fortune now," Raj said one evening. "We could sell it and split the money," Neha added. Amit hesitated, "But Mom still lives there." Raj immediately replied, "Exactly. One old person living alone in such a huge property makes no sense." That sentence revealed everything. Their mother was no longer seen as a human being attached to memories and emotions. She had become an obstacle standing between them and money. Greed rarely enters dramatically. It grows quietly, like poison slowly spreading through the heart. The siblings started noticing things they had ignored before: the size of the land, the increasing market value, the possibility of building apartments there someday. Every visit to the house became less emotional and more calculating. Raj once walked around measuring spaces with his eyes while talking about future investments. Neha suggested modern renovations that would increase resale value. Amit listened silently, clearly uncomfortable, but unable to stop the discussion. Meanwhile, Shanta remained unaware of what was happening. She still prepared tea every time her children visited, still smiled whenever they arrived, still thanked God that her family gathered together sometimes. That is the heartbreaking thing about genuine love. It often cannot imagine betrayal. One afternoon, Shanta overheard part of a conversation accidentally. "If Mom moves into a care facility," Raj whispered, "selling the property becomes much easier." Shanta froze near the kitchen doorway. For a moment, she thought she had misunderstood. Surely her own children could not be discussing her like a legal problem. But then Neha spoke softly, "We just have to convince her emotionally." Emotionally. The same word they later used during dinner. That day, something inside Shanta quietly cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but painfully. Still, she said nothing. Because mothers often choose silence even when their hearts are breaking. They protect their children's image even from themselves. Over the next few weeks, the siblings became more manipulative. Raj started talking about safety concerns. Neha constantly mentioned how lonely elderly people become. Amit awkwardly brought brochures for retirement homes but could barely maintain eye contact while doing it. None of them openly admitted the real reason. Money, property, greed disguised as concern. And perhaps that is what made it even more cruel. If they had been honest, the pain might have felt cleaner. But pretending selfishness was love made the betrayal uglier. Shanta began noticing how differently her children treated wealthy people compared to her. They spoke politely to rich business contacts, showed patience toward strangers, and respected influential people with admiration. But toward the woman who sacrificed her entire life for them, only irritation remained. Greed changes the way people see value. Kindness starts looking weak. Sacrifice starts looking ordinary. Love starts looking inconvenient. One evening during dinner, Raj became frustrated because the food was too salty. He pushed the plate away impatiently. "You can't even cook properly anymore." The room became silent. Years earlier, the same son used to praise every meal she prepared. But now his standards had changed. Not because the food changed, because his heart had. Neha once complained that caring for elderly parents destroyed personal freedom. Amit nervously agreed without fully thinking. Shanta heard every word quietly from the next room. That night she cried alone beside her husband's photograph. Not because she feared poverty, not because she feared loneliness, but because she realized her children no longer saw her as family. Only responsibility. Only burden. Greed doesn't always look evil from the outside. Sometimes it looks practical, reasonable, modern. People justify it using logic. We deserve comfort. We earned success. We need financial security. Slowly, selfishness begins sounding intelligent, and love begins sounding foolish. Raj convinced himself he was being realistic. Neha convinced herself she deserved a better lifestyle. Amit convinced himself staying silent avoided conflict. That is how greed wins. Not all at once, but through small compromises inside the conscience. The most tragic part was that none of the children were truly poor. They already had stable lives, careers, and opportunities. Yet greed made them feel incomplete no matter how much they possessed. Because greed does not end after getting more. It grows stronger, like hunger that can never be satisfied. The siblings eventually stopped discussing memories connected to the house entirely. Nobody mentioned birthdays, family dinners, or childhood moments anymore. They only discussed prices, ownership, paperwork, and timing. Emotion disappeared from their conversations. And once emotion disappears from a family, relationships begin dying silently. Meanwhile, Shanta still defended her children whenever neighbors noticed tension. "They're stressed from work," she would say gently. A mother's love often continues protecting children, even when those children become the source of her suffering. But deep inside, Shanta understood something painful. Her children had not become cruel overnight. They had slowly allowed greed to replace gratitude. And gratitude is what keeps families human. Without gratitude, people forget sacrifices, forget memories, forget humanity itself. A person blinded by greed starts believing relationships exist only when useful. Parents become burdens. Siblings become competitors. Love becomes transactional. Everything becomes a calculation. And eventually, such people lose something far more valuable than money. They lose the ability to feel genuine connection. Because wealth can buy comfort. It can buy luxury. It can buy status. But it can never recreate the warmth of sincere family love once greed destroys it. By the time the children realized what they had become, it was already too late. The damage was no longer financial. It was emotional. And emotional wounds inside families often leave scars that survive for generations. After her children asked her to leave the house, Shanta could not sleep the entire night. The rain outside continued falling softly against the windows, while the silence inside the home became heavier with every passing hour. She slowly walked through each room carrying a small suitcase, stopping again and again as memories returned to her like painful echoes. Near the hallway wall, there was still a faint pencil mark showing Raj's height from when he was 10 years old. In the corner near the kitchen, the floor remained slightly scratched from the day Amit accidentally dropped a metal chair while learning to walk. And beside the old staircase hung a family photograph taken many years earlier when life still felt warm and complete. Every part of the house carried love. But suddenly, none of that mattered anymore. Because the people inside the house no longer carried respect. That night, Shanta finally understood something many people realized too late. A building made of bricks can protect your body, but only respect and love can protect your heart. Without those things, even the biggest house becomes emotionally empty. The next morning, sunlight entered through the curtains, but the home still felt cold. Raj sat in the living room talking loudly on the phone about property prices, while Neha drank coffee without looking at her mother once. Amit remained quiet, unable to handle the guilt growing inside him. Shanta watched them silently. Years ago, mornings inside the same house sounded completely different. Children laughing, school bags falling on the floor, her husband reading newspapers while she prepared breakfast, arguments over television channels, birthday decorations, festival celebrations. At that time, the house felt alive because love existed inside it. Now the walls were the same. The furniture was the same. Even the family photographs remained hanging in place. But emotionally, the home had already disappeared. Because respect is what transforms a structure into a family space. Without respect, people merely share walls, not hearts. Shanta remembered the day she and her husband first bought the house. It was small, old, and unfinished, but they were incredibly happy. Her husband held her hand proudly and said, "One day this place will be full of laughter." And for many years it truly was. They painted the walls together themselves because they could not afford workers. During summer nights, the entire family slept on the roof under the stars during electricity cuts. During monsoon season, rainwater leaked through the ceiling, and everyone laughed while placing buckets underneath. Those memories were poor in money, but rich in togetherness. That is why Shanta never cared about luxury. For her, home was never about expensive furniture or modern decoration. Home meant feeling valued, feeling safe emotionally, feeling wanted. But now, despite standing inside the same house, she felt like an unwanted stranger. That pain is difficult to explain. Sometimes people become homeless emotionally long before they actually leave a place physically. Later that afternoon, a neighbor named Kamla visited after hearing whispers about family tension. She sat beside Shanta quietly and looked around the silent house. "What happened?" she asked softly. For a moment, Shanta could not answer. Then she smiled weakly. "It's strange," she whispered. "This house used to feel small when my children were young because it was full of love. Now it feels enormous because everyone's hearts became distant." Kamla held her hand silently. Outside, Raj continued discussing business matters without noticing his mother's tears. That was the real tragedy. Not poverty, not old age, but emotional neglect. Many elderly parents continue living in beautiful homes while feeling completely alone inside them. Their children provide food, medicine, and physical comfort, yet forget the most important thing: human warmth. simple respect, conversation, attention. Because emotional abandonment hurts more deeply than physical hardship. A poor family filled with love often feels happier than a wealthy family filled with coldness. That evening, Shanta opened an old wooden box hidden inside her cupboard. Inside were tiny objects she had saved for decades: school drawings, birthday cards, old report cards, and broken toys her children once loved deeply. To outsiders, those items looked worthless. But to a mother, they were priceless. Each object carried memories of connection. A memory of a time when her children ran toward her instead of away from her. She picked up a faded paper where little Neha had once written in crooked handwriting, "My mom is the best mom in the world." Shanta stared at the note for a long time before tears slowly rolled down her face. Children often say beautiful things innocently, but adulthood tests whether they truly meant them. The sad truth is that many people begin valuing material comfort more than emotional relationships as they grow older. Careers become more important than conversations. Property becomes more important than people. Convenience becomes more important than compassion. And slowly, homes lose their emotional soul. The television becomes louder than family discussions. Phones become more important than parents sitting nearby. People eat together without truly speaking. Everyone lives under one roof, while emotionally existing in separate worlds. That is not a home. That is only shared space. Late that night, Amit quietly entered his mother's room. His eyes looked tired and guilty. "Mom," he whispered, "are you angry with us?" Shanta looked at him carefully before answering. "No." That answer hurt Amit even more. Because anger can disappear eventually. But disappointment stays much longer. He sat beside her silently. Then after a long pause, Shanta spoke softly. "When you were little, you used to hold my hand every time you got scared during storms." Amit lowered his eyes. "You trusted me completely," she continued. "You believed home was wherever your mother stood." The room became painfully quiet. "Do you know what makes a home beautiful?" she asked gently. Amit could not answer. "It's not walls, not money, not decoration. It's the feeling that someone inside truly cares whether you smile or cry." Her words pierced deeply because Amit knew she was right. The house had become emotionally empty long before they noticed. Greed, stress, ego, and selfishness had slowly removed warmth from their relationships until only routine remained. And routine can never replace genuine love. The following morning, movers arrived to inspect furniture after Raj secretly contacted property agents. They walked through rooms discussing measurements and renovation possibilities, while Shanta quietly stood nearby listening. One man casually pointed toward the kitchen. "This wall can be removed completely." Another said, "The old furniture should be thrown away." To them, the house was simply business. But Shanta felt as though strangers were dissecting pieces of her life. Still, the most painful part was not the strangers. It was watching her own children agree so easily. Not once did they stop and remember the emotions attached to the place. Not once did they wonder how their mother felt hearing all this. Because once respect disappears, sensitivity disappears too. People stop caring about emotional consequences. That evening, Shanta stepped outside into the small garden her husband once loved. Many flowers had dried because nobody cared for them anymore. She slowly touched the dead leaves and realized the garden looked exactly like the family itself. Neglected, disconnected, dying quietly. Love requires attention, just like plants do. Without care, even the strongest relationships slowly wither. As sunset covered the sky with orange light, Shanta sat alone near the entrance of the house for the final time. Children from nearby streets laughed while playing outside, reminding her of years long gone. And in that moment, she finally accepted something painful but true. A person can survive losing wealth, can survive losing comfort, can even survive loneliness. But no place can ever feel like home once respect disappears from the hearts living inside it. Because real homes are not built with cement. They are built with kindness, patience, gratitude, and love. And the moment those things die, even the most beautiful house becomes nothing more than a silent structure filled with strangers who no longer know how to care for one another. The morning after Shanta agreed to leave the house, the atmosphere inside the home changed completely. Her children believed everything had finally gone according to plan. Raj appeared unusually relaxed for the first time in weeks. Neha sat comfortably in the living room scrolling through luxury apartment ideas on her phone. Even Amit, though uneasy, remained silent because he did not know how to stop what was happening anymore. Meanwhile, Shanta quietly folded her clothes into a small suitcase without saying a single word. Sometimes silence carries more pain than anger ever could. The house felt emotionally exhausted, as though even the walls understood something terrible had happened there. Yet the children continued moving forward with cold practicality. Raj was already calculating property value in his mind. Neha discussed renovation possibilities. They behaved less like family members and more like business partners finalizing a deal. Greed often creates temporary confidence. People start believing they are clever, justified, and untouchable. That morning, Raj walked into the kitchen and spoke casually. "Mom, the care facility has good medical staff. Honestly, this is best for everyone." Shanta simply nodded weakly. But deep inside, Raj interpreted her silence as acceptance. He never realized it was heartbreak. Sometimes people become so focused on winning that they fail to notice what they are destroying. Outside, rain clouds slowly gathered again while Shanta prepared tea one last time in the same kitchen where she had spent decades feeding her family. Her hands trembled slightly while pouring the tea into cups, yet none of her children noticed. Their attention remained fixed on the future they imagined for themselves. A future involving money, property, comfort, success. But life has a strange way of exposing hidden truths at the exact moment. People believe they have complete control. Around noon, a black car stopped outside the house unexpectedly. Raj frowned while looking through the window. "Who's that?" A man wearing a dark suit stepped out carrying several legal documents in a folder. His calm expression immediately changed the atmosphere inside the home. He approached the front gate slowly before asking respectfully, "Does Mrs. Shanta Verma live here?" Shanta looked confused. "Yes, that's me." The man introduced himself politely. "My name is Suresh Malhotra. I was your late husband's attorney." The room suddenly became silent. Raj and Neha exchanged nervous glances immediately. The lawyer entered the living room and carefully placed the folder on the table. "There are instructions your husband left behind many years ago," he said calmly. "Instructions that were only to be revealed under specific circumstances." A strange tension spread through the house. "What circumstances?" Raj asked impatiently. The lawyer opened the folder slowly before answering. "If any family member attempted to remove Mrs. Shanta Verma from her home against her dignity or emotional well-being." For the first time that day, fear appeared in Raj's eyes. Neha straightened nervously. Amit lowered his head immediately. The lawyer continued speaking with professional calmness. "Your husband anticipated that greed could one day divide this family. Because of that, he legally transferred ownership of all family properties, investments, and savings solely into Mrs. Shanta's name." The words hit the room like thunder. Raj stood up instantly. "That's impossible." The lawyer remained calm. It is completely legal and fully documented. Neha grabbed the papers with shaking hands, while Raj searched desperately for mistakes in the documents. But there were none. Every signature, every legal stamp, every detail was authentic. And suddenly, the balance of power inside the room completely changed. Only minutes earlier, the children believed they controlled everything. Now they realized they controlled nothing. That is the irony of greed. People chase power so aggressively that they forget how quickly circumstances can reverse. Raj's confidence disappeared almost instantly. His tone softened unnaturally. "Mom, maybe we misunderstood each other." Neha quickly added, "We were only worried about your health." But their sudden kindness sounded hollow. Because true love does not suddenly appear when money changes direction. Shanta quietly watched them without speaking. For the first time in years, she saw her children clearly. Not the innocent little children she once protected. Not the Bobbies she carried in her arms. But flawed adults consumed by selfishness. Still, the biggest surprise had not yet arrived. The lawyer removed another envelope carefully from the folder. "There's also a personal letter from your husband," he said gently. He asked that only Mrs. Shanta read it. The room became completely silent. Shanta's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, faded slightly with time. The moment she saw her husband's handwriting, tears immediately filled her eyes. She began reading silently. "My dear Shanta, if you are reading this letter, then it means something painful has happened inside our family. I know your heart. I know you would sacrifice your own happiness before speaking against our children. But I also know how easily people can lose themselves when greed enters their lives." Tears rolled down her cheeks slowly. The lawyer and children remained silent. "You spent your entire life protecting this family. If one day our children forget your value, then let this be your protection. Everything I built belongs to you because you earned it beside me through sacrifice, patience, and love." The room felt emotionally frozen. Even Raj could no longer maintain eye contact. The letter continued. "If our children choose greed over gratitude, do not punish yourself by believing you failed as a mother. Sometimes good parents still raise children who lose their way, but truth eventually reveals every heart." Those words pierced deeply into everyone listening, especially Amit, because deep inside, he knew the letter was right. Greed had slowly changed them all. Not instantly, not dramatically, but little by little over time. The lawyer quietly closed the folder after Shanta finished reading. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of anger, instead of revenge, Shanta simply looked tired, emotionally tired, because betrayal from strangers creates pain. But betrayal from your own children creates exhaustion deep inside the soul. Raj suddenly stepped forward. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said quickly, "but we can fix this." Neha started crying softly. "Please don't misunderstand us." But their panic revealed the truth more clearly than words ever could. Only minutes earlier, they were comfortable removing their mother from the house. Now suddenly, they wanted reconciliation. Not because their hearts changed, but because circumstances changed. And genuine truth always appears when people lose the benefits they were chasing. Amit finally broke down completely. "I'm sorry," he whispered while crying. "I should have stopped all this." Unlike the others, his guilt sounded real. Because sometimes among selfish people, one person still carries enough conscience to recognize the damage being done. Shanta slowly looked around the room. The same living room where birthdays had once been celebrated. The same walls that once echoed with laughter. And now all she could feel was emotional emptiness. The twist her husband left behind had exposed more than legal ownership. It had exposed character, real intentions, real priorities. And once truth exposes people completely, relationships rarely return to what they once were. That is why truth is both painful and necessary. Many families survive peacefully for years while hiding silent greed, jealousy, or selfishness beneath polite behavior. But eventually, life creates moments where masks fall away and reality becomes impossible to hide. Sometimes through money, sometimes through hardship, sometimes through inheritance. And in those moments, people finally reveal who they truly are. The most powerful part of truth is this: it does not need loud arguments. It does not need revenge. It simply appears. And once it appears, nobody can escape seeing themselves honestly anymore. That day, Shanta realized something deeply important. Justice does not always arrive through punishment. Sometimes justice arrives through revelation, through seeing people exactly as they are without illusions. Her husband's final decision did more than protect her financially. It protected her dignity. It reminded her that her sacrifices mattered, that her years of pain, love, and endurance had value beyond money. And most importantly, it forced her children to confront the painful reality of what greed had turned them into before it completely destroyed whatever humanity still remained inside them. The lawyer's words still echoed through the house long after the documents were placed back on the table. Raj stood frozen near the window, unable to believe everything had collapsed within minutes. Neha wiped tears from her face repeatedly while trying to explain herself. Amit sat silently with his head lowered, ashamed of what their family had become. And in the middle of that painful silence stood Shanta, the woman they had treated like a burden only hours earlier. For the first time, her children truly looked at her, not as an obstacle, not as an old woman living alone in a valuable house, but as the person who had carried their entire lives on her shoulders for decades. Yet strangely, Shanta felt no victory inside her heart. No satisfaction. No desire to humiliate them back. Because mothers who spend their lives loving deeply often do not know how to hate completely. She slowly walked toward the kitchen and touched the old dining table gently. Tiny scratches still remained from years of family dinners and childhood games. She remembered birthday cakes, school celebrations, arguments over homework, and nights when all 5 family members laughed together until midnight. For a moment, the memories almost broke her completely. Not because she lost the house emotionally, but because she realized how greed had stolen the warmth from her children's hearts. Money had not simply changed their behavior. It had changed the way they saw love itself. Raj suddenly stepped closer. "Mom, please listen to us," he said nervously. "We were under pressure." Neha quickly added, "We never wanted to hurt you." Shanta looked at them quietly. Years earlier, she would have believed every word immediately. But pain changes people. Not always into bitter people. Sometimes into wiser people. And wisdom teaches you the difference between genuine regret and fear of consequences. Before the lawyer arrived, none of them had shown hesitation while asking her to leave. None of them stopped to imagine how terrified or lonely she felt. But the moment money disappeared from their hands, concern suddenly returned. That truth hurt more deeply than anything else. Amit slowly walked toward his mother with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I knew this was wrong, but I stayed silent." Shanta touched his face gently. Silence during injustice causes damage too. But unlike the others, Amit's pain felt real because guilt had already started changing him from within. The room remained emotionally heavy for several minutes before the lawyer finally asked softly, "Mrs. Shanta, what would you like to do now regarding the property?" Everyone looked toward her immediately. This was the moment where she could take revenge. She could throw her children out, exactly the way they tried to throw her out. She could humiliate them publicly. She could punish them using the same pain they caused her. And honestly, nobody would have blamed her for it. But Shanta remained quiet, because revenge may satisfy anger for a moment, yet it rarely heals the heart. She slowly walked toward the window and looked outside at the street where children were playing together in the fading evening sunlight. Their laughter reminded her of her own children years ago, before ego, greed, and selfishness complicated their hearts. Then suddenly, something changed inside her. Not weakness, not surrender, but clarity. She finally understood that pain can either destroy a person or transform them into someone kinder. And at that moment, she made a decision nobody expected. She turned toward the lawyer calmly. "Sell the house," she said softly. The room immediately froze. Raj looked shocked. "What?" Neha stepped forward in panic. "Mom, no." But Shanta raised her hand gently, stopping everyone. Her voice remained calm but strong. "This house stopped being a home long ago." Nobody could respond, because deep inside, they knew she was telling the truth. She continued quietly. "When respect disappears from a family, walls cannot protect relationships anymore." Tears rolled down Neha's face. Raj looked completely broken for the first time in his life. The lawyer nodded respectfully. "And what would you like done with the money?" Shanta looked down for a moment before answering. "Use half of it to create a shelter for abandoned mothers." The entire room fell silent again. Even the lawyer seemed surprised. Shanta's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "There are many mothers who sacrificed everything for their children and still ended up alone. Some sleep hungry. Some live abandoned in hospitals. Some wait years for one phone call that never comes." A painful silence spread across the room, because suddenly the children realized this story was bigger than their family. Far bigger. It was the reality of countless parents growing old in loneliness after dedicating their lives to raising children. The lawyer spoke gently. "And the remaining money?" Shanta smiled faintly. "I only need enough to live peacefully for the rest of my life." Raj covered his face with his hands. At that moment, the full weight of their actions finally crashed onto him emotionally. Not because he lost property, but because he realized his mother still chose kindness after everything they had done to her. And that kind of kindness creates unbearable guilt inside selfish hearts. Neha broke down crying completely. "We don't deserve you," she whispered. Shanta looked at her daughter lovingly despite the pain. "A mother's heart does not stop loving easily," she said softly, "but love without respect becomes suffering." Those words stayed with all three children forever. Over the following months, the old house was sold exactly as Shanta requested. Construction soon began on a new shelter for elderly women who had been abandoned, neglected, or left alone by their families. Many people from nearby communities came forward to help after hearing Shanta's story. Volunteers donated clothes, furniture, books, and medical supplies. Some elderly women arrived carrying nothing except broken memories and loneliness in their eyes. And every time Shanta welcomed them warmly, they felt something many had forgotten existed: dignity. One old woman cried while holding Shanta's hands and said, "My children left me at a hospital and never returned." Another woman admitted she spent years eating alone in silence while her sons argued over inheritance. Story after story revealed the same painful truth. Parents spend their youth protecting children from pain. But many parents spend old age protecting themselves from emotional abandonment. The shelter slowly became more than just a building. It became a place where forgotten mothers felt human again. Women laughed together during meals, shared memories, prayed together, celebrated birthdays nobody remembered for years. And above the entrance gate, one name was written beautifully in gold letters: Mother's Heart Home. People across the city began visiting the shelter after hearing about Shanta's decision. Journalists asked her why she chose kindness instead of revenge after suffering so much humiliation. Her answer remained simple. Pain should never create more pain, she said softly. If suffering teaches us nothing except hatred, then suffering wins. Meanwhile, her children struggled emotionally with guilt every single day. Raj stopped caring about luxury the way he once did. Expensive things no longer impressed him because he understood how empty success feels without humanity. Neha became quieter and distant from social circles that once mattered deeply to her. Amit visited the shelter often, helping elderly residents with food, medicine, and daily tasks. Little by little, the siblings started changing. Not instantly, not perfectly, but genuinely. Because true guilt, when accepted honestly, can become the beginning of personal transformation. One evening during Mother's Day the following year, all three children visited the shelter together carrying flowers nervously. They found Shanta sitting peacefully in the garden, surrounded by elderly women laughing beside her. For the first time in many years, she looked truly calm. Not lonely. Not exhausted. At peace. Raj knelt beside her with tears in his eyes. "We can never undo what we did," he whispered. Shanta gently touched his shoulder. "No," she replied softly, "but you can choose who you become after your mistakes." That sentence changed their lives forever. Because every human being makes mistakes. But the real measure of character is whether those mistakes create arrogance or growth. As sunset covered the shelter garden with warm, golden light, the family sat together quietly. The pain of the past still existed, but something new had finally entered their hearts again. Understanding, gratitude, humanity. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Not revenge, not punishment, but the decision to remain kind in a world where bitterness would have been easier. Moral of the story: parents spend their lives sacrificing silently so their children can live comfortably. But when children forget gratitude and respect, families begin breaking apart from within. Wealth, property, and success may impress the world, but kindness, love, and humanity are what truly define a person. The greatest strength is not taking revenge after being hurt. It is choosing compassion even when life gives you every reason to become bitter. Disclaimer: this story is completely fictional and created only for emotional storytelling and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or situations is purely coincidental. The purpose of this video is to spread awareness about family values, respect for parents, and emotional relationships within families.